Start. 3, 2, 1.
Hello, this is Jenny Luscombe, and this is Feeling is Healing, and we're on episode 24. And today we're going to be discussing freedom, which is my favorite thing in the multiverse. So I'm just going to start by explaining what I was just explaining to Andy before we pressed the record button. So as usual, this show is for me, and what I mean by that is when I'm kind of looking for information to kind of know what to do the show on, I usually get an intuitive hit. So I'll pick up information from what's going on around me in my own life and in the lives of clients and just stuff in the world, whatever it is. And it became obvious to me this week that it was about freedom. And it sort of came through from some stuff that I was doing with my own healing. But I was saying to Andy, like, what I've noticed is I'll receive the information from my external and I'll go, okay, right, I need to do the show on that. And then I'll look into myself and sort of how that applies to me. And then I'll do a bit of research and look at what other people have to say. And so I'll do all of that preparation and then I'll know the subject like really well and how to express it. And so I do this every week. And every single week now, a couple of days after I do the show, I realized that I needed the information that I learnt that was kind of new to me. So each time I do it, I know stuff about this topic, but then in the researching of it and the expression of it, a few days later, something will unfold in that vein. So on that topic, and then I'll know and understand what to do more clearly because I did the show. So it's kind of like Andy said that I'm a self-fulfilling prophecy, which made me laugh because that's how it is. And I actually think that maybe we all need to try and do that a bit more. Pick up signals, from what's going on around us, because obviously that's what we need to be learning, at this current space and time. Otherwise, the universe wouldn't be appearing to us as these people in those situations, having these conversations. So picking up the messages and then going all in, figuring out why we're being presented with that, doing a really good job. And then it's like a new set of armor because you needed to do that because your future self told you. It's brilliant. So I just wanted to start with that because it made me laugh that I was a self-fulfilling prophecy. But it's proof again that time doesn't exist, which I like seeing the evidence of. So yeah, as usual, this show is for me and all of you. So I looked at what the definition of freedom is, and it can be looked at in a million different ways, but I think that it's being able to think, speak, and act in accordance with what you want without interference and without hindrance. So it isn't one thing, it's different for us all. So a good question to start with would be sort of rewind your life all the way back to when you were a child. How free do you think you were to think, to speak, and to act in accordance with what you wanted? So when you look at all the situations that we're in now, personally and collectively, none of us are free. And I think it's fair to say none of us have ever been free, which makes us all victims of slavery and abuse from the systems that were designed this way. So we never had an option to not be victims. And then we received the treatment that we received from our parents. Not all of it was bad, but obviously our parents were victims too. And if we don't resolve the victim consciousness, we just perpetuate it. And so we've got it coming at us from all angles. So It's quite common for people to be triggered by the word victim because we've all been shamed for being victims, and it's the worst thing that can happen to a person. Anyone who says that you shouldn't be in victim consciousness is wrong, because in order to heal it, we have to be in it. And we need others to witness our pain, to understand what we've been through. And we do often get stuck trying to get the perpetrators of our abuse to acknowledge what they've done to us, which they're never going to do. It's highly unlikely. So what do we do about this? So one thing that I sort of want to make clear, sort of, generally, but also on this topic is, I'm not floating on a cloud and, claiming to know it all, because I don't. I've been a victim of all different kinds of terrible things, which I'm not going to go into. But it started from day one in my life. So many things have happened to me. In my own family, I've been victimized in a lot of different ways. Every way that you can have been abused, I've been abused. In my working life, lots of things have happened to me, particularly when I've blown the whistle on corruption and things that I've seen that I've not agreed with and tried to protect other people. I've been bullied by social services when something happened in my ex-husband's family that they tried to pin on us. I was bullied in a teaching job when I blew the whistle on corruption there. I've been abandoned by a lot of people. So I am a victim, and there are still things sort of reverberating in my life that I still haven't resolved. But I'm quite happy to say that I know the way. I know the way to resolve them. And it does take a long time sometimes, especially when you lack support and when you are the scapegoat. Because how the law of attraction works, obviously we like to think of it as we focus positively and then all these wonderful things come to us. But we're attracting, our point of attraction is also attracting from our subconscious mind. So we don't attract what we want, we attract what we are. So we're attracting from our conscious mind and from our subconscious mind. So any wounds that we haven't healed, we're going to be attracting from that, which is the better part of our consciousness, really. So the law of attraction can make us a victim again and again and again, especially if you stand up to the perpetrator, especially if you stand up for other people. Because if you do that, you are seen as a threat, even if you're right. And probably the person that you're trying to blame is going to deflect that back to you. And then you will receive a re-traumatization of victimhood. So it's really strong energy. It's so strong. And we need to be in it. All of this, you shouldn't be a victim, is it's an agenda. It's an agenda to keep you in victimhood. Because if you don't look at your own victimhood, you're suppressing it, and you can't clean up something that you're not looking, that you're making invisible to you. So you have to make it visible. So it's hard to keep going. I'm on a quest for freedom personally and for the benefit of humanity, because I can see the way, and it's not a very popular way, because a lot of people don't want to work on themselves, quite understandably, because it just seems endless, the huge amount of trauma that we have to transmute. But here we are, it does seem never ending. So if we just go back to where this started, so where this victimization comes from, when we were young, we were not allowed, or we were not enabled to think, speak, and act in accordance with what we wanted. So many of us were forced to think, speak, and act in accordance with what our parents wanted. This is where it all began. So we had to commit and be responsible to them which set us up to feel bad about commitment and responsibility, actually. So, which is a terrible thing, because that is actually the key to our freedom. And I'm realizing this more and more because I study the gene keys, and I study my own gene keys profile. And in my hologenetic profile, so in my astrology, in my birth chart, what I'm here to do, I've got gene key 55 right in the middle of my chart, which is the shadow of victimization leading to the mastery of freedom. So when I found out that I had that right in the center of my chart, it made me laugh, because I'm an emotional freedom techniques practitioner, and I've been on a quest for freedom all my life. So I knew that I was onto something when I started to study gene keys. And interestingly, my daughter also has gene key 55, and she is responsible for waking me up. It was becoming a mum that woke me up. And she continues to challenge me in ways that lead me closer and closer to freedom. So this is quite a complicated thing. So I want you to remember this key. Commitment and responsibility for ourselves and to ourselves is the road to freedom. Now, the problem with that is that we have loads of baggage connected to commitment and responsibility in itself, because commitment and responsibility doesn't feel good to us, because for the majority of our life, we've been committing to other people. We've been committing to be responsible for other people's happiness, which never works. It never works. It never works. So I said that 3 times for a reason, because it never works. So if commitment and responsibility would lead us to our own freedom, why don't we do it? So we don't do it because of the negative associations we have, because of loads of things that happened when we did commit to another person's way of doing things and it didn't work out. So in my life, that has led me into very dangerous circumstances where I was not safe. So because I did as I was told, and I went to things, I did things for my mum because she told me that I had to, because she said so, I was in grave danger a number of times. So in my body, I'm holding a very negative association to commitment and responsibility. Now, I've got a double whammy of that on top of that, because whenever I tried to commit to myself or take responsibility for myself in ways that I chose with my own conscious free will, I was scapegoated and made bad guy for it over and over again, repeatedly. So commitment to ourselves and taking responsibility for ourselves, including the trauma and everything that was done to us, including taking responsibility for the way that we were victimized. And I don't mean that it's okay when people abuse us. It isn't. But how we can take responsibility for what happened, because we can't change it. We can't change what happened, but we can change the way we feel about what happened. That's where we can take radical responsibility for ourselves and commit to ourselves, which will lead to your freedom. I don't know how long it will take, but we're on the road. So when we were forced to commit and we were forced to be responsible in certain ways that were not for us, it was for somebody else, we have associated this sense of being forced with any kind of type of commitment or responsibility. So learning to commit and be responsible for what we want and who we are feels literally impossible. So when we committed to them, we lost everything. That's where we lost ourselves. And it's that we are unwinding. So now, you know, the external world, the governments, the systems, they're energetically re-traumatizing us, because they're energetically our mum and our dad. They are energetically kind of showing us our own unhealed wounds from childhood. So we're projecting onto them what has already been done to us. So we could do with pulling out the plug of the emotion about what has already been done to us, because it will stand us in much better stead to face what we're facing right now with everything going on around us. Yeah, so the gist of this is just notice what pops into your head about when you were forced to abandon yourselves and be and do what someone else dictated. You were forced to comply, you were forced to commit to someone else. So you gave up your autonomy because you had to and you didn't have a choice. And now you've got the hangover of that. And that's what we're unwinding. So there's a reason why victim energy feels really strong. And I found this out from the Gene Keys, which has been so helpful, actually. So when you're stuck in victim consciousness, the reason that it's particularly difficult to get out of it is because there's two things that can happen with your emotion about being a victim. So you can either suppress and repress that emotion connected to being a victim, which is huge, it's a volcano. You can either repress that and then you get a certain outcome as a result of that, or you can react. So there's a repressive nature and there's a reactive nature. So the repressive nature, you're pushing it down, all that emotion, making it invisible to you. And the reactive nature, you're expressing that into the world. So how that looks with victimization specifically is if you're suppressing, repressing the emotion, you will be stuck in complaining energy. If you are of the reactive nature and you are expressing much more overtly the emotion and the energy connected to victimhood and what's happened to you, then you will be stuck in blaming. Now, the reason that these two are particularly resistant to healing is because when we complain and when we blame, we are stuck in a pattern of no resolve. Now, this is really important and it makes sense to really pay attention to this because this is what's keeping us all stuck and this is what's keeping us all from being free. So, quite understandably, we want to complain when someone has made us a victim. Quite understandably, we want to blame. Now, I am never saying that we shouldn't complain or that we shouldn't blame. I think we should if that's what we're feeling. And when we're complaining, we're crying out in pain for someone to witness us and to understand us and to just listen and be present with us. Because then what we're actually trying to do, our subconscious mind is trying to validate what happened to us so we can begin the healing process. But what happens to us when we complain is that everybody is completely turned off listening to you. It triggers their buttons of unhealed. They shut you down. Oh, stop whinging, and we all got that from our families, stop whinging, nobody wants to listen to you, stop crying, all of that. So we need to move that energy and it's going to be invalidated by literally everyone around you. So I'm not saying suppress that need to be heard. I'm saying find willing witnesses, find people who give a shit. So people that love you and are willing to witness you. And go directly there, consciously make that transaction. Don't manipulate people by complaining, trying to get them to see your pain, because that is what you're doing, understandably. And it's not a judgment. I know this because I have been suffering it. And I'm starting to understand it a lot more. since I've been looking at it this way. So the gist of this is when you're complaining, it's something that you need to do and that is valid, but you would be better equipped to feel the energy of the complaining and to process the emotion that is underneath the complaining by using self-healing techniques and also by getting willing witnesses in your life to hear you and to consciously transact and do that so that you can feel validated and heard. Because it's not until you make real, until you allow yourself to have suffered and to have been in the situation that you're in, that you can start to heal it. So you can begin to heal victimhood by going into the feeling of complaining at a somatic level, at a physical level in your body. So that's the repressive nature. And actually, all of you will be both. You're going to err on one side or the other, either the repressive nature of complaining or the reactive nature of blaming. You're going to have both going on and you'll flip between the two, and it's a pendulum swing. And the pendulum swing is happening because both parts of this consciousness are valid. Both needs to be heard, both needs to be sensed, both needs to be honored. So the complaining side of things gets you stuck in a loop and it's never resolved if you stay in that. The blaming side of things also you don't get resolved because when you're blaming the perpetrator of the abuse, they don't have the capacity to understand where you're coming from because it's highly likely that they don't see you as a separate individual. If somebody has made you a victim, they're probably on the narcissistic side of things, which also is not a judgment. Narcissism itself is just a reaction to trauma. So when you blame, you usually just get that person deflecting the thing back to you because they don't have the capacity to deal with what you're suggesting, and it suits them to hide behind you. So ultimately, this comes back to, in very, very intense and painful circumstances, having to be there for yourself. So this is about being in the emotion of complaining and the emotion of blaming, because that's what's keeping you stuck in the victim consciousness. If you can start to move this energy, and you'll have to work on it for a while because there's a lot of it, the more you hear yourself in terms of the energy of the victimhood, in terms of the complaining and the blaming that you've got going on, and also see it coming back at you as well. If there's somebody in your life that constantly complains, not only is that a message to you that they're crying out in pain, desperately needing to be validated so they can begin a healing process, it's also showing you that you have the complaining energy suppressed within you that you need to deal with. If you've got blaming coming at you, then that's showing you that you also have this energy within you that you need to deal with. Yeah, this is hard. This is really, really hard. There's an example here that I sort of stumbled across when I was doing some research about this, about how once you've kind of processed your complaining and blaming energy of victimhood, you will just naturally move towards self-responsibility and commitment to self in ways that you hadn't been able to access before because it's all connected up. Because the origin of this victim energy has come from not being allowed to commit to self, not being allowed to take responsibility for oneself and one's own boundaries. So there's sort of like, as there is, oh God, along the path, there's like loads of ways that kind of trip us up. So if you think about responsibility and commitment to self, kind of like feeling dangerous, which has come from when you have committed to something and it's not worked out. If you think about the hippie movement back in the 60s, There was a lot of people dropping out of society and deciding not to commit to anything as a reaction to, you know, negative stuff they were seeing in their external. You know, just chill out and get stoned and go surfing and just, be yourself. These people are kind of stuck in a I'm just going to do me, I'm going to withdraw my energy. And basically it was all about freedom, or so we thought. But what's happened there is it's actually an illusion of freedom, because it's not freedom if you're reacting to not being allowed to be yourself by withdrawing your energy. So the withdrawal of your expression and of your energy, which is what the hippies did, it's not freedom, because you're not going in the direction of yourself. You're just giving up and kind of like going all into the kind of hedonism, and which has its place, don't get me wrong. But it doesn't make sense. It's an illusion of freedom. If you just decide to kind of not do anything or not do much with your life, it's a choice. But ultimately, it's a reaction to victimhood, because I'm sure that the majority of people in that circumstance, if they healed their victimhood wounds and then they went all in the direction of themselves, that's where freedom lies. So yeah, there's always lots of ways we can be tripped up along the way. So commitment and responsibility to what you want will lead you to freedom. So I think that these are quite important keys to witness yourself in a really productive way. So if we suppress and repress the emotion of being the victim, we get stuck in complaining. We feel alone in our pain. We desperately need to be witnessed so we can begin the healing process. And then when we're blaming, we desperately need people to see what has been done to us by them, because they couldn't have known what they were doing, otherwise they wouldn't have been so cruel, is often the way. But that cannot be resolved, and the complaining cannot be resolved. So if we express the emotion of victim consciousness, then to ourselves, and to willing witnesses, then we can start to make it real what happened to us, because we have to see the dirt to clean the house. And complaining and blaming energy is neither wrong or bad. Both are temporary, but particularly resistant to processing. So I would recommend getting a pen and paper and doing this process. You can kind of like dip into it now, or you can go back on the replay and do it as many times as you like. But this is very, very productive in the direction of freedom. So I would recommend tapping on the center of your chest, which is your thymus point, or on the side of your hand underneath your little finger, which is the karate chop point, because this reduces the cortisol in your body. So when you're tuning into negative emotion, you are pulling the plug out at a somatic level in your body, especially if you're connecting into memory and current circumstances. So the key to tuning into any of these volcanoes, any of these frequencies, is to ask yourself where it is and how do you know it's there. And today in this session, I'm going to ask you to make friends with it and to move towards it. Because you'll notice when you do that, because it might feel impossible at first, but you'll notice that when you do that, the moving towards the energy that you've been trying to avoid your whole life feels so different. It feels different. It feels better. Because it's the right way. This stuff was never meant to be buried and disowned and denied. and rejected by us, but we did it with good reasons, a million good reasons. We suppressed all of this. If we did that, we can undo it. So it wasn't our parents that shut us down. It was us that shut us down because they tried to. So I think let's spend a little bit of time on each one of these energies. So we can do parts work by being with the part of us that feels a certain way. So all the parts of our consciousness are all valid, but they don't always align with each other. So I was talking to a friend today, actually, and we were both saying that we both have a pattern of wanting to be seen, but also not wanting to be seen. So both of those parts of my consciousness are completely valid, but they come from different places in my life. So there are parts of me that want to be validated, that want to be heard. You know, look at me, mummy, you know, the little kid that just wants to be praised and encouraged and loved and, you know, whatever. So there's that part of us wanting to be seen. But then there's all the other aspects of us that were disapproved of. And so that made us suppress loads of aspects of ourselves. And then we didn't want to be seen because we were ashamed and we pushed parts of ourselves away. So we have parts of us that are valid that seem to oppose each other. Now, just because they oppose each other, that doesn't negate one from the other. It just means that they all need to be heard. So when we go into these parts, the best way to do it is to go into the part as if you were a method actor. So, for example, dealing with victimhood, we could go into the part of us that just needs to complain. And we can also go into the part of us separately that needs to blame. And these parts have good reason. So we don't want to fix or change. Trying to fix or change is the opposite energy to what we want. We're going in as caretakers of the emotion. We're going in all ears with our popcorn. And we want to hear those aspects of consciousness fully. We're completely done with this flipping from the complaining back to the blaming to the complaining back to the blaming, because what we're doing is we're trying to resolve each aspect. And we're flipping from one side to the other because both are valid. So if they're both valid, we have to go there 100%, all in. So we can start to practice that today. So while you're tapping, just tune yourself into the feeling of having to commit to what someone else wants. This sense of obligation, this sense of force even. And then also the sense of danger that can go with going the wrong way, you know, compromising, doing that for someone else. And also a good place to start here is when we had good reason to complain when we were children and we were told to stop whinging or stop complaining. So we needed to be heard, to feel significant and to feel loved. But we had to bury the complaining, like very, very early on. We didn't have a voice. We had to bury our own voice. One of the most painful things ever. So when people are complaining around you, start to see them as the child that was punished for being emotional, which is one of the worst things that ever happened on our planet. So we've all got a volcano in there, and it's our job to let it be there. And we don't have to do that all at once. And we're all responsible for our own well-being. So you can kind of dip your toe in if you're not fully sure about this. But I have to say that, you know, the universe never brings us what we cannot cope with might feel unbearable, but I can tell you that the unbearable feeling comes from resistance to feeling it. The unbearable feeling doesn't come from feeling it, although it might feel intense. But once you actually drop into allowing it to be there because you've got that reason, because you were victimized, then you can just let it flow in your body. So what does that feel like now? How do you know it's there? So just imagine that little you that had very valid things to say, that had very valid things to complain about and to whinge about or moan about, or, you know, it was your right as a human to say when you were not happy. And somewhere along the line, we were not allowed to do that. And it goes back and it goes back and it goes back. And it's all, this is like heavy ancestral energy. So just ask yourself, where is this in my body, this energy of complaining? So for me, it feels like it's sort of centered around the stomach. And I can feel like it's sort of like static electricity is like a way that I could sort of describe it. It needs to go somewhere. So this is my body reflecting. It needs to be heard. It needs to be expressed. It needs to be witnessed by somebody else so that I can feel justified, so that I can understand myself more. So when this right is taken away from you and you are even punished for doing it, and it's a necessary thing, it was your way of attempting to get resolution and to heal, it can feel really bad in your body. So just notice what that is for you. It can feel really uncomfortable. And for some people, it's like a full body feeling, the feeling of having complaining to do, or someone complaining around you. And it's probably very similar, whether it's you doing it or whether it's another person doing it, because another person doing it is going to trigger what's within you. But sometimes it's more helpful to look at the person externally doing it to connect with your own body, because you've got less resistance to judging them than you have to judging yourself. So it might make you feel incredibly tired and drained and exhausted. And that's mainly because it doesn't go anywhere, because there's a no resolve pattern set up within this. So you can get really creative with this. You could set up a situation for your inner child where they could complain and there would be no kind of negative outcomes as a result of that. You know, you could put them up on the stage, give them a microphone, fill the stadium with a million other people who have the same wounding, people who are genuinely interested and compassionate and want to listen. So where in your body, just notice it, where is the intensity of this complaining energy? So think in terms of your own life. What do you have to complain about? And what is the emotion of that? And what is the emotion of trying to resolve that through complaining, but being rejected for doing that? Because we suppressed it and then we suppressed it again and then we suppressed it again. And this energy can flow when we meet it. So imagine moving towards this complaining energy and shaking its hand and making a cup of tea for it. Pull up a chair. Practice letting it be there. Let it be there. And then make a commitment to yourself to hear your complaints, to feel your complaints, to acknowledge your complaints, to sense them, to validate them, to allow yourself to be broken in this way because you were victimized. And if people have told you to get out of victimhood, you shouldn't be like that or whatever, they're projecting onto you and they're in resistance to your victimhood because it's triggering theirs. And if they're trying to jump over it, then good luck to them because it's not going to work. So we can't go over it, we can't go under it, we have to go through it. So going through it is being your own witness. Get witnesses, real, solid people in the world. Get witnesses if you have them around you, but not all of us do. Being your own willing witness is the way forward. So allow all of that tension, tightness, the tears, the frustration, the never-ending feeling of it. Let it all be there in your body. Make friends with it. You've got good reason for it to be there, and it is so good for you to be tapping while you're tuning into that. So notice the location of it, and then imagine your eyes are in there. You've got your popcorn, and you're watching the film, which is yourself. And be curious. Being curious and wondering about yourself is literally the best thing you could do right now in this time and space. So spend as long as you can doing that. Obviously on the show tonight, we haven't got time to sort of stay in that, but just make a note of where it is in your body. And then set an intention to commit to yourself and to take responsibility for yourself to go back for a closer look. Because when you're properly in the somatic experience and you're there looking at all the sensation and the tingling of that, your body will give you memory. And when that happens, you are winning. So when you get memory triggered from looking at sensation, connected to that energy that you're exploring, that is the core root of your lack of freedom in this context. So allow the memory, allow yourself to go to the version of you in that memory. What is she or he experiencing? Let them express it. Let them be that way. Don't fix or change. Just be there for them and say, I'm here for you. I've got your back. It makes sense what you're saying. I see you. I hear you. So let your body speak to you. You're learning your body's language. So on the other side of the coin, you've got another volcano, which you sometimes flip to, which is blaming. Now that's a different feeling in the body. So you were complaining because you committed to what someone else wanted instead of yourself. And now you're blaming because you also committed to what someone else wanted. So we were angry and it was unfair and we were rejected and we were abandoned. And then we've had it deflected back to us, and it's a never-ending cycle of doom. And they deflect it back because they know that we're deep down. And they're in deep shame, which is what deflection is. So that means they've pushed themselves away so many times. So you had good reason to be in blaming and to defend yourself. But usually when you're blaming somebody else, they can't be wrong. And more than likely, they would hide behind you rather than taking responsibility. So just ask yourself, where is this in my body? This intense energy of blaming connected to this victimhood. For me, it feels like it's in my head and in my shoulders. And it's sort of like it feels like a sort of like a tornado. It's moving. It's kind of making me think of, like the online, like depending when your phone is doing something, the blue circle that goes round and round. It's like that in my body, blaming, blaming. It just doesn't go anywhere. It's valid. It feels good sometimes to do that. And all of this is a part of sovereignty. But if we want to move towards freedom, we have to move towards this feeling and move through it. And that is intense. So remember to breathe as naturally as you can while you're doing this, while you're tapping. And if it feels like it's never going to end, you will notice changes if you keep going. So just keep tapping and allow the blaming to be there. So like you did with the complaining, notice the source of that in your body. Where does it feel the most tight or tense or tingly? It might feel like a heaviness or a block or quite literally a rock in the way, like an obstacle. So notice where it is. Try not to fix or change. Notice if you're trying to do that, and it's okay to try and do that. But just know that this, as well as the complaining energy, is temporary. It's in our bodies, showing us the way. And it's showing us the way to freedom. So look at the blaming energy up close. Imagine your eyes are in there and you're moving towards this. You're looking at that in your body. You're looking at the texture of it, the color of it. You're looking at the memory that comes. You've probably got all these stories going around your head. He said, she said. Feel the intensity of that blaming and that conflict and that no resolve. Let it be there. Make friends with it. Move towards it and wonder about it. Because it's feeling this because you are a victim that will set you free. And it makes 100% sense that we all tried not to be victims, probably all our lives. So what does that look like in your body? What does that feel like? So remember, each time you do a part, you work with a part, take it on as if you were a method actor. So you could do this loads of different ways. What does this blaming have to say? Let it just let rip. Just let it go. Just let it express all that stuff that you can't say out loud, or that maybe you even have and it's been rejected. Let that part of you express that in ways that are meaningful to you. And it might just be to have a good old cry at this point. But we all have the capability to transmute this energy into freedom. It doesn't seem like it when we're in the thick of it in our bodies, but it's because we've hidden it and we've tried not to be victims that we are still victims. And with this dark force on the planet, this is one of the worst ways that this is happening. But it's a very similar energy in lots of different ways, keeping us stuck in a loop. We don't have to be in this loop anymore. We can step out. And we can step out by committing to ourselves, by taking responsibility for ourselves. And that means taking action in the world as well as taking action with our emotion and self-healing. But it's kind of like a very cruel paradox that you can't take action in the world in the way that would honor you being yourself until you have pulled the plug out of all this trauma. But at the same time, you don't want to need to be perfect before you take action. Oh God, there's so many ways that we're stuck and trapped. It's a nightmare. So we've got a complaining volcano and a blaming volcano. Now, I think while we're at it, like, add this to your list, because this is the way to freedom. The fear of committing to yourself. So the fear of doing the thing, being the thing. So just make some notes on your complaining energy, your blaming energy. Where would both of those appear? What was it appearing to you like? What sensation, color, whatever it was? Kind of keep a little copy of what that is, because you need evidence that this works. So the more you tap and witness it and allow it to be there without needing it to fix or change, curiously moving towards it, the more it will change. It will change the way it appears in your body. It will change the memories that come. It will change the intensity. It will turn into different places in your body. It will probably move. It will probably disperse. There'll be layers of this. And it's about just getting popcorn and watching the show. So it's like being curious enough about yourself to commit to yourself in this way. So we just want to be our own willing witnesses and get as many willing witnesses in our life as well. So another part that is directly connected to all of this would be the part of us that now fears committing to ourselves because of all the trauma, because of our negative associations with commitment itself, because we've done a lot of committing for other people, which has gone pear-shaped, and we might even have been in grave danger when that happened. And that's happened to me quite a lot. Lots of lessons. So just ask yourself while you're tapping, this fear of committing to myself and taking responsibility of myself, where is that in my body? So when I think of doing the thing, being brave and committing to building my YouTube channel, or committing to having that discussion with that person, that important conversation, or committing to being in relationship with yourself in the way that you need, that other people might not like, what happens in your body when you tune into that fear of self-commitment? Now ask yourself a question. When you're in that fear of commitment to yourself, does it feel the same as when you had to do as you were told when you were a kid? Because the chances are it's very similar in your body, because it comes from the same place. So when you think of what you would need to do in your life to fully be you, and what that would mean for other people, what's the emotion that comes up in your body? So it's probably fear-based, but it could be lots and lots of different emotions. So when that's happening, just allow it to be there. Just be in it without needing to fix or change. And then keep going back to it so you can see the changes. The more you do, the closer to freedom that you get. But also, spend as much time with, and I would say spend even more time with the part of you that is freedom, that is free. So this would be a good idea to go to this part every day. What does freedom feel like in my body? What words do I associate with that can help me feel that in my body? So go to the part of you that is free already. Maybe in your future, maybe it's your future self. But ask yourself, what ways am I free now? Because we all have ways that we're free now. So freedom generally might feel like justice or mastery or bare feet on the ground or sunshine and music, dancing, free will, laughter, acceptance, approval, but also self-approval, and allowing and non-interference and flow and connection and experimentation and spontaneity and truth. All those things that we weren't really allowed to go to when we were kids necessarily. So really go there. What does freedom feel like in your body? For me, it feels like my head's falling off. It's just like unbridled joy. It just feels really like I could just float away. It feels like fun. It feels like, that kind of that feeling, when people say I've arrived, that sense of arriving, not in a physical place, but just arriving in yourself the way that you want things to be, the way that you want to live, without compromising, without being out of integrity, without being interfered with. Notice what that is for you and spend as much time as you can with that part, if not more than the others. If you keep going to those 4 parts on repeat, rinse and repeat, your freedom will get closer. And when you work on your own freedom in this way, you will bring it in your external as well. So I think I'm going to finish there. And I think hang on 7 o'clock, so I better stop. But thanks everybody for listening and happy experimentation with that. Keep tapping and keep thinking about your emotion. Keep going there. Keep knowing that it's there for you and it's there to be felt. And if we're not doing that, we're putting off the inevitable. But thanks everybody.
Thanks, Jenny. I've stopped the recording now.
Thanks, Andy.
Oh, I've just put my phone back up here.
Sorry, I meant to.
An extendable arm thing that I attach my phone to.
Oh.
And I just had my phone in my hands there for a minute. Oh. So yes, no, we're back in situ now.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thanks everybody for coming.
Thanks, Jenna.
Thank you.
Right, yeah. So yeah, we've got Jackie and Douglas up next. Are you sticking around? Or
yeah, I'll stick around for a bit.
Okay.
I might go and do some cooking.
I'm just going to change. Hi, Jackie. Hi.